Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to God.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let us attend. When the women disciples of the Lord learned the angel, the joyous message of thy resurrection, they cast away the ancestral curse, and they lately told the apostles. So forth. Those women were Mary, the mother of James, Salome, and Mary Magdalene, our patron saint. Mark 16:1. Today I will begin with a focus on St. Mary Magdalene. Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from which he had cast out 7 demons. John 20:11-18. Mary Magdalene is known in the church as the Apostles of the Apostles, as she was sent with authority. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him, as he said to you. Mark 16:7. She was the first to witness the angel in white sitting in the tomb. John 20:11. Mary was looking for Jesus, but he was not there. She was so concerned that she was mourning and weeping, believing that someone had taken him. She was asking the angel where they had laid him. Throughout Jesus' ministry, Mary Magdalene had been following Jesus and his apostles. Today, we are celebrating St. Mary Magdalene's feast day, and our parish is 36 years old. Having a rich history, the roots of the parish began when an organizational meeting was held in January of 1989 in the home of Marion and Diane Combs. Then on March 11th, 1989, the group met at the Siemens Chapel in Savannah, Georgia for the first Divine Liturgy, with Father Peter Smith officiating and Matushka Terry accompanied him. They came one Saturday month, and Father John Cromiak also came one Saturday month on loan from the Antiochian Church. Services were held there through the end of April 1990. Eventually, services could no longer continue to be held there because of the great influx of seamen from China, Poland, and South America. And the Siemens Chapel Board needed the facility to assist them. Several people petitioned Bishop Dimitri to form a mission, and it was granted. Saints' names were placed in a hat, and St. Mary Magdalene's name was drawn. Our first rental property was Skidaway Road next door to a veterinarian's office, and we held our first Vespers on May 11th, 1990. During Vespers and liturgy, you could hear the dogs barking, birds chirping, and other animals making noises. And boy, was it like a zoo. Father Adrian Pollard was our first priest, along with Matushka Zania and Daniel, their son. Father Adrian would sometimes go over to the vet's office and bless the sick animals. Sometimes he was even asked to go over there by the veterinarian because she had an animal that was extremely sick. And believe it or not, that animal would survive. This location was interesting because it had an old Maytag appliance. It was an old Maytag appliance store, which was the size of a 20-foot by 40-foot room, with the Maytag symbols on the carpet. Our processions were done in a small parking lot in front of the vet's office. In the beginning, this location was great because it was across the street from Krispy Kreme donuts. Great coffee hours, let me tell you. We never ran out of donuts. We were on Skidaway until November of 1994, then temporarily located at St. Paul's Greek Orthodox Church until 1995. From there, we picked up our items out of the storage and moved on to Bay Street. Processions were done through the parks near the Cotton Exchange, across from Bay Street, and all kinds of bystanders would join us in celebrating the Christ's resurrection on Pascha. It was interesting when we would do our processions in the parks and across the street in the Cotton Exchange, because can you imagine Saturday evening at 11:30 at night next to the clubs? We were only a couple of doors down from the customs office. So we had the clubs. If you're looking at the building, the clubs were to the right of us. So there were all kinds of cars going back and forth and music going. And so Father Adrian had set up to where he had one of the police officers to meet us at the intersection to escort us so that we could go across safely. Because we had about maybe 15, 20 people. So at that time I was a subdeacon, and I was bearing the cross, leading the procession. And as we're coming down the stairs, we had about 30 flights of stairs to come down out of the church to enter onto the sidewalks of Bay Street. And so I'm looking around, and I'm looking for a police officer, and I don't see a police officer. And it's very busy at that night, or at that time. So we started walking, and Father says, don't worry about it, he'll be here. So we're walking down the sidewalk, and I'm getting ready to step off the curb just as the light is turning red. And I hear these sirens. Here comes this police officer. He must have been doing, now imagine Bay Street. Bay Street is very busy. He must have been doing 45 or 50 miles an hour. And when he came to the intersection, he was going sideways. He was sliding into the intersection, and as soon as my foot hit that ground, he had stopped traffic. So I went across, leading the procession across the street, and then we went into the small parks that are next to the Cotton Exchange. And you have to imagine that in the parks at night you have homeless, you have many that are intoxicated and so forth. So we're leading, we have our candles and our banners and so forth. And we went in with 15, came out with 30. So it was really interesting because we had all kinds of people following us. But by the time we get ready to cross the street, you look behind you, they disappeared. They were all gone. So it was a blessing to have them at least in the procession during Pascha. And this would happen, not the police officer, but this would happen about every Pascha that we would go over to the park and do our processions to come back into the building. Eventually this location was sold, and the owner didn't want a church in their building. On August 16, 1999, we moved into a Baptist church on Waters Avenue. Divine Liturgy was celebrated at 8 a.m. in the morning. This allowed the Baptist parish to have their Sunday services at 10 a.m. Therefore, we had to set up and take down the altar for each service. Everything had to be taken down and stowed on the premise there so that they could go ahead and do their services. We had a small coffee hour, and then we would leave. Sometimes we would just leave and go somewhere and meet and have something to eat. Father Adrian eventually relocated, and we continued with the reader service for 6 months. Father James Bowman, a monk from New Skeet Monastery in New York, was then attached to our parish. We decided that we had to search for a permanent location. The property we found was located here, 1625 Fort Howard Road in Rincon, Georgia. We moved here in December of 2002. We had to find a location because it was different at the Baptist church, so we had to find a different location. We sent people out to look for land, and land in Savannah was extremely expensive. For less than an acre of land, it was about $500,000, and that didn't include running sewage. So we sent people out and about on the outlying areas of Savannah. And this property here was available for sale. The two families on both sides here owned the property, and we put a bid in for this property. We were the lowest bid. And the woman who sold us the property stated that she wanted a church on her property. And so here is St. Mary Magdalene, our parish. Dennis Rusnick and myself purchased a double-wide trailer to be used for the church services and as a hall, all in one. So when you go over to the hall, you'll notice that if you look at the hall inside, you'll notice there's marks of petitions. In front of the structure was used for services, which is where we eat, and the back part was used for fellowship. That was the back part where we serve the food. So it was pretty tight. The two rooms, which are currently where the choir practices and the priest's office, were used as living quarters for the monk. So he lived on premises. St. Mary Magdalene started to have a growth spurt, and we were running out of room, and decided that the double wide was not large enough. The parish began discussing building something larger. One day, Father James was exercising on his treadmill, and he heard a knock at the door. Upon opening the door, Father James was surprised to see a complete stranger standing there who introduced herself as Miss Laura Jones. She wanted to visit us as she had heard about our parish. As Father was walking her around the church grounds and telling her that we were growing and that we needed to build a church, but that we had very small amounts of funds. Without hesitation, Mrs. Laura Jones said that she could do this. Father continued to show her around, and she stopped and said, "Father, I meant what I said. I want to build you a church." Mrs. Jones paid for 75% of the church. At that time, we still owed a small balance to the diocese. Father James and I began to travel once a month for 9 to 10 years to a mission in Helena, Georgia, near Vidalia. Father James retired in January of 2018. We held Vespers on Saturday and a Typica with communion on Sundays for several months. Later, Father Nicholas Hubbard was a full-time priest for 3 years during the beginning and towards the end of COVID. With a limited number of parishioners permitted to attend, our numbers dropped significantly, and the diocese relocated Father Nicholas in 2021. Immediately, Father Michael, who was already retired and was asked by our dean, Father John Cox, to stand in as a temporary priest, with only a mere handful of parishioners. Father Michael continued holding Vespers, Vesperal liturgies, Divine Liturgy, Presanctified, and a wonderful informative homilies. Father Michael decided he wanted to have the interior of the church painted. With the help of Father James Bozeman and a parishioner from St. James Mission in Beaufort, South Carolina, as well as our own volunteers, the interior of the church was repainted. Father Michael ordered icons and icon prints to adorn the walls, imbuing our worship space with a warm feeling of spirituality, mysticism, and God's grace. With the blessing of our great God, our parish began to grow to the point that we could afford to have a full-time priest. Last year, Father John Cox and Father Stephen Osborne visited our parish, and to make a long story short, we presented Father Stephen, Matushka Lindsay, and of course Zoe, with an offer that they could not refuse. On January 2nd, Father Stephen and his family became full-time Southerners, and Father Michael went back into a long-desired and well-earned retirement. In closing, St. Mary Magdalene followed Christ throughout his ministry with many others who provided for him from their substance. Luke 8:3. Just as St. Mary Magdalene Orthodox Church has done these many years, traveling from one area to another, go out into all the world and proclaim the gospel to every creature. Mark 16:15. I ask you, are we all going to be like St. Mary Magdalene, who was sent with authority and tell the world that Christ our God has risen and proclaimed to all the world? I would like to mention the names who are the founders of this church. They are Joan and Paul McMillan, Barbara McMillan, Greg and Pat Sturgis, Nick Sturgis, Nick and Marion Combs, Diane Combs, Alexander Combs, and Michael Yushak. Amen. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to